I possess the ability to rewind time. At the age of 18, my mother died in an accident. I kept pulling back the timeline, but no matter what, I couldn't save her. Because I reshaped time too many times, I became trapped in the loop. This time, I rewind the timeline back to when Mom was young. As I approached her, she raised her youthful face and asked who I was. I replied, "I'm the future you." Lucy stared at me in shock, then took a few cautious steps back, sizing me up as if trying to decide whether I was insane. Then, she hesitated and said, "Are you joking?" I methodically recounted her family background, academic performance, and some little secrets only she would know. All of these were things Mom had told me when I was little. Lucy's expression shifted from initial disbelief to shock, then to belief and curiosity. She circled around me. "Are you really the future me? Why do we look a bit different?" To say we look alike is definitely true. Compared to Dad, I resemble Mom more, and at a glance, we could be mistaken for twins, but my features still carry traces of Dad, so there are bound to be differences from her. I casually brushed it off, lost weight, had plastic surgery, went through a life-changing trauma. Pick whichever reason you can accept. Lucy was taken aback at first, then burst into laughter. "You must be me. I do have such a witty way of talking." If an ordinary person encountered their future self, the first thing they'd naturally ask would be how their future turned out, what major events they experienced, and whether there was something important they came back to say, like avoiding certain disasters, for example. But Lucy's thought process in her younger days was a bit different from most people's. I had already prepared a long answer in my mind to respond to the above questions, but before the person in question could even ask. Then I heard her take out paper and pen and ask, "So, tell me the winning lottery numbers for the future." Me, "I don't know. Forget the fact that I didn't memorize these things before the time reversal. After so many reversals, even if I had memorized them, I would have long forgotten." Lucy frowned and gave me a reproachful glance, as if saying, "How could you not remember something so important?" She persisted, asking, "You didn't remember a single one?" I nodded. She continued, "Then tell me. Who will win the next World Cup? Where will the future richest person be? Where will housing prices skyrocket? What will be the investment hotspots in the coming years?" I never expected my mom to be even more intense in her youth than the version of her I knew as a child. I can only share what I know, but I'm not sure if saying it will make any difference, because I've used time reversal too many times and now I'm trapped in time. Without exception, every attempt ends with my mother's death, followed by the distortion of time and starting over. I don't know if this is heaven's punishment for me, for my lack of reverence toward time. After all, I stumbled upon such a powerful cheat code, yet repeatedly used it for the same irreversible purpose, so it punishes me by shattering my hopes every time I exhaust all my efforts to save her, showing me that no matter what I do, it's all in vain, and everything I attempt only makes things worse. After Lucy finished recording what I said, she pondered for a moment before asking, "Then why did you come back from the future? Is there something you want to tell me?" I lowered my eyes and said, "I want to tell you not to marry Kelvin. Kelvin is my father. He and my mother were high school sweethearts who went from school uniforms to wedding dresses, from being a couple no one believed in at first, to an enviable loving couple, to a marriage full of trivial conflicts, and finally ending in a scene that left everyone sighing with regret. They were in love for 5 years and married for 18. I don't know when Kelvin started cheating, but I remember that one day when I was little, they began to argue frequently. Later, Kelvin rarely came home, and then Mom would cry at home, forcing me to call him and ask him to come back. At first, he still cared about me, but once he had other children, he stopped caring. People around me say I am the crystallization of my parents' love, the child born when they were most in love. From the earliest memories I can recall, I knew I was the apple of my parents' eyes. During an era when the two-child policy was newly introduced and single daughters were rare, they insisted on having only me, consistently rebuffing anyone who suggested they have another child, especially a son. Before I could form lasting memories, my father took care of everything for me. While my mother focused on recovering her health, he shouldered the responsibility of raising me, always keeping me by his side no matter how busy or exhausted he was with work. But I was too young to retain many memories of his kindness. What lingers more in my mind are glimpses of his retreating figure and the impatience in his expression. Growing up gradually, I came to accept the fact that he didn't love me. Lucy froze again. She was currently dating Kelvin, but those around them didn't have much faith in their relationship. Kelvin came from a poor family. His father was skilled in drinking, whoring, gambling, and even cheating and domestic violence. His mother couldn't take it anymore and ran away, leaving him as his father's punching bag. As he grew a little older, he learned to rebel against his father. Their house was just across the street from Lucy's, and every few days you could hear the sounds of quarrels, insults, mixed with all kinds of vicious curses, and even physical fights. He lived like a troublemaker, and no one dared to provoke him, whether at school or on this street. Lucy had some interaction with him when they were kids, but as they grew up, they became strangers instead. After years of treating each other as strangers, their first contact was just like the idol dramas on TV, a hero saving the beauty. But it was her who saved Kelvin. He had probably just finished fighting with his father and was covered in injuries when he ran into a group of people who had a grudge against him. He was nearly beaten to death, and it was Lucy who called the police. After that incident, they started seeing each other more often. From ambiguous feelings to being together, no one approved, and everyone advised her to stay away from him. But only Lucy herself knew that Kelvin was different from what they said. And he meant something different to her. Lucy asked me, did he cheat on me? She asked the one thing she couldn't bear to accept, and received my affirmative answer. For a moment, she looked lost, sitting on a bench by the roadside, unconsciously swinging her legs as if deep in thought. This was undoubtedly difficult for her to accept, just starting a relationship, still in the honeymoon phase, only to suddenly learn that her future boyfriend would cheat on her. After a moment of contemplation, Lucy spoke up, actually, when you nodded, I really wanted to find some excuse for him, or for myself, like how he doesn't seem like the type to cheat, or how he swore he'd love me forever, that even if he stopped liking me, he'd say so and let us part ways with dignity. She had actually imagined the scenario of a future partner cheating before. She thought she'd break up decisively. She could never tolerate deception or betrayal in her relationships. But when it actually happened to her, she didn't feel as resolute as she'd imagined. She couldn't even picture Kelvin cheating. After all, they're in the honeymoon phase right now, both still carrying a bit of that teenage melodrama, feeling like they must defend the purity and beauty of their love at all costs, not to follow in their parents' footsteps. Lucy spoke up, you should know, my parents split up after cheating on each other. I froze for a moment. I didn't know. Mom never seemed to talk to me about my grandparents. At one point, I even thought they had passed away before I was born. There were so many adult matters I was never involved in, but right now, I am her future self, so I have to pretend like I know. Lucy seemed to treat me as her confidant and said, my father cheated when I was very young, and I was the one who caught him in the act. She didn't understand it at the time. It was just an ordinary afternoon when she came home early, pushed open the door, and saw two naked bodies. They were all startled by her sudden appearance. The woman was her elementary school teacher, and they had fallen for each other in the class she taught. Even when the teacher came for a home visit, her mother had warmly entertained them, cooking a table full of dishes, while they exchanged flirtatious glances over the steaming dinner table, using Lucy as an excuse to get close. Lucy was like the stick that poked through the paper window, stirring up turbulent waves in what was once a peaceful life. Her parents had the biggest fight ever, then divorced, and then neither wanted her. Mom said she felt nauseous at the sight of her because she looked like Dad, and even more so because she was the one who brought the teacher to Dad, shattering the illusion of a happy life. Dad said she wasn't a boy. As a result, Lucy was awarded to Dad and thrown into the care of her grandparents, while Mom walked away with her luggage without looking back. When they met again, she had already become someone else's mother, and Dad had started a new family with the teacher. They all had a bright future ahead, and she was forgotten, so she couldn't accept infidelity. She could accept a natural separation if love faded, but she couldn't bear being deceived or kept in the dark. As she grew older, she gradually realized how disgusting the scene she had accidentally witnessed back then was, so much so that it made her nauseous every time she thought about it. Lucy had someone deliver the breakup message to Kelvin. It happened so abruptly that the messenger was dumbfounded, repeatedly asking if it was a joke or for real. They left only after confirming it, looking utterly dazed. I asked her, aren't you going to tell him yourself? I never expected the breakup talk to be this easy. Just a casual, he'll cheat, did the trick. I thought it would take some twists and turns before my young mother would have a sudden realization and break up, and I even prepared myself for her being too infatuated to listen to any advice, stubbornly insisting on her own way. But she let go very decisively. Lucy shook her head. I'm afraid I'd soften if I said it myself. After all, the current Kelvin hasn't done any of those despicable things. She also thought she would be reluctant, but the moment she thought of infidelity, images from her childhood would flash in her mind, and in those vivid scenes, the man's face was replaced by Kelvin's. The mere thought of Kelvin becoming that kind of person made her sick. I feel a bit sad. Why can you let go so easily now, but not in the future? Entangled with Kelvin for so many years, she lost herself in the process. Only at the very end did she have a sudden awakening. Yet she died on the very day of their divorce, leaving loved ones in tears while bringing joy to the wicked. I casually wiped my face, smearing the tears into my hair, letting the evening wind dry them away. Lucy took me back to her place. Since my current status could be considered undocumented, there were only 2 elderly people at home, her grandparents. I never met my great-grandmother and great-grandfather, as they both passed away before I was born, apart from some blurry memorial photos. No other photographs of them remain. Grandpa Lou was sitting at his doorstep with a palm leaf fan in his hand. When he saw me, he thought his old eyes were playing tricks on him. Wow, did you go out and come back with a twin? Where did you find this one? Before this, Lucy had been very quiet the whole way, clearly not as carefree as she appeared, still immersed in the sorrow of the breakup. But the moment she saw Grandpa, she smiled again. You might not believe this, Grandpa, but this is the future me. Great-grandfather stood up, holding a palm leaf fan in one hand and a small stool in the other, and said, Nonsense. Whose child did you bring over? Your grandma didn't prepare much food today. Share some of yours with your classmate later. Even though that's what was said, when it actually came to the dinner table, neither Lucy nor I ate any less. Great-grandma, worried I might not have enough to eat, even went to the kitchen and made me an extra serving of fried rice with eggs. After dinner, I followed Lucy back to her room. It was quite small, simply furnished, but somehow felt incredibly cozy, probably because it was filled with traces of her life everywhere. Sitting by the bed, I felt happy that so many people loved her. Grandpa and Grandma are so good to us, Lucy said. They love me for my father's sake and treat all his children well, including the 2 children born to the mistress. The reason she was treated slightly better than the other 2 was probably because she was abandoned and could stay with them often, while the other 2 only visited occasionally during holidays. Lucy said, My grandparents know I find them disgusting. Every time they visit, they give me some money to go out and play. Then her room would turn into a playground for the other 2. She would always return to find her belongings damaged or missing. But she could never confront them about it because this wasn't her home. She had no right to question anything. After her first outburst failed to change anything, she stopped filling her room with personal items. Apart from daily necessities, there was almost nothing else. If Lucy were to run away from home, she could probably pack up her things quickly. Most of the time, she felt like she was floating in the air. Without a fixed place to stay, without a home, her grandparents loved her. But they also loved their own son and the other 2 grandchildren. For a moment, I fell silent. It seemed I didn't really understand my own mother. It also seemed somewhat understandable why she would be so desperate to maintain her marriage in the future, trying to hold on to what she couldn't grasp. She was too eager to have a home of her own, a place where she could put down roots. Lucy laughed and said, When I got kicked out before, I always spent time with Kelvin, to make me leave. My grandparents would suddenly become very generous during those times. What was Lucy thinking back then? She thought that when 2 people without a home came together, that itself became a home. 2 cold people hugging each other can become warm. Coming back to her senses, she realized that Kelvin hadn't done anything wrong so far. He loved her more than her own parents did. Yet she was abandoning him over something that hadn't even happened. Realizing who she had mentioned again, a flicker of confusion passed through Lucy's eyes. She didn't know if her decision was absolutely right or not, but whether it was right or wrong, it seemed to be hurting Kelvin at this moment. I seemed to have realized this too, and for a moment, the room fell into silence. At this point, the rustling sound from the tree branches outside the window became somewhat loud, as they continuously tapped against the window, producing a rather eerie noise. The sound wasn't quite right, after all. There wasn't that much wind now. Lucy and I looked out the window at the same time and saw a boy standing on a tree branch, shaking it desperately. The tree rustled loudly, its leaves falling like rain. Lucy said, It's Kelvin. She instinctively walked to the window but hesitated when she was about to open it. Her hesitation made the boy, who was standing awkwardly on the branch, even more anxious. He shook the branch even more violently. It wasn't exactly thin, and it looked like it was about to snap. Lucy was afraid the neighbors might notice this unusual scene and witness his misdeeds, adding another stain to his already tarnished reputation. She was even more worried that her grandparents might come out to check on the situation. They might knock him down from the tree. Lucy still opened the window. Kelvin anxiously spoke up. "Lucy baby, why do you want to break up? What did I do wrong?" I walked to the window and heard such an endearment escape the young father's lips, instantly making me cringe so hard I could dig my toes into the ground, my whole body breaking out in goosebumps, even my facial expression twisted slightly. I don't know what they called each other when they were in love. The only remaining memory of their affection is Dad calling Mom, wife. They would snuggle close together, squeezing little me in the middle until I protested, trying to push away Dad's massive frame, and only then would they exchange a knowing smile. But those memories were too distant, buried beneath more recent memories of arguments. If it weren't for the images of their still passionate love stirring my recollections, I might never have remembered them for the rest of my life. Kelvin was about to say something when he noticed someone suddenly appear beside Lucy. He instinctively looked over, and the sight nearly made him fall from the tree. He thought he was seeing double from overwhelming grief. "When did you learn to make clones?" Lucy's face darkened. "What nonsense are you talking about? Get out of here right now." Kelvin looked aggrieved, his clear black and white eyes fixed on her, and said, "I won't leave. Tell me why you're breaking up with me. If you want me dead, at least let me die knowing why. My reputation is already bad enough. If we break up after less than 2 weeks of dating, people will just think I dumped you. That'll make my reputation even worse. Who can I even complain to about this? Tell me, did you start dating me just to ruin my reputation and make sure I can't find a wife?" He shamelessly sat on the tree branch and cried, plucking a leaf to wipe his tears, letting out a sound like a boiling kettle. I heard the voices of my great-grandmother and great-grandfather downstairs. "Did you forget you boiled water?" The kettle's whistling. "I didn't boil any water." Must be someone else's kettle whistling. The corner of my mouth twitched. Seems everyone has their youthful days. Before meeting them, I thought they had been adults since childhood. Lucy was at a loss for words. She couldn't exactly say, "You'll cheat in the future, so I'm breaking up with you now." She could say it, but with Kelvin's thought process, he'd just assume she was making up stories to deceive or brush him off without even bothering to find a proper reason. She could only say helplessly, "Stop crying." Kelvin cried even louder. He felt she couldn't even be bothered to humor him. She wouldn't even make up a story to deceive him, not even bothering to find an excuse. Originally, because of his bad reputation, the people around her disliked him, so he had been feeling very insecure in this relationship. When someone told him Lucy was going to break up with him, he felt like the sky was falling. The sky has been falling all this time. My mom and I watched my dad cry on the tree branch for nearly 2 hours. At night, with all the mosquitoes, he kept swatting them while crying, occasionally making spitting sounds, probably from small insects flying into his mouth. Even then, he refused to come down. Someone next door was shouting about whose kettle had been boiling for almost 2 hours without being turned off. My mom went from initial panic to helplessness, then to softening, then to impatience, and finally to speechlessness. I sat on the bed eating the snacks Lucy had secretly stashed away and asked, "Shouldn't we do something about it?" Lucy kept writing in her diary without looking up. "Ignore it. He'll come down when he's tired of crying." But Lucy kept falling asleep, and Kelvin didn't come down either. I shone a flashlight at him, even flashing it in his eyes, which earned me a fierce glare and some muttered words. I never expected Mom to sleep so soundly when she was young. One moment she was persuading Kelvin to go back, worried he might actually spend the night on the tree branch, and the next she was so exhausted she lay down and fell asleep. Back then, she often couldn't sleep at all, suffering from insomnia to the point of relying on sleeping pills. I took the flashlight and went downstairs, arriving under that tree, shining the light upward. "Stop shining it," Kelvin shouted. "The bugs are all flying over here. Are you doing this on purpose?" His face was cold, brows furrowed, not at all like the easygoing, somewhat silly demeanor he had in front of Lucy. It was actually a bit closer to how he would be in the future. Kelvin slid down from the tree and said, "You came down alone. Where's Lucy?" I replied, "She's asleep." Kelvin's furrowed brows relaxed, showing no trace of displeasure at being ignored. I said, "I want you to stay away from her. You can't make her happy." Kelvin was stunned for a moment, then sneered. His gaze fell on my face, on my eyes, with a somewhat peculiar expression. I've heard this kind of talk many times, but I've never once considered changing my mind. I'll love only her in this lifetime, and that will never change, I thought to myself. Then his lifetime must be really short, less than 10 years. I parted ways with Kelvin on bad terms. There was no scene like in novels where a child travels back in time, and the parents immediately feel an inexplicable love upon seeing them. Even before the time reversal, I wasn't his favorite child. Before the age of 5, I could barely be called the apple of his eye, but after 5, I became the mud stuck to him that he couldn't shake off. I've seen how he dotes on children outside our home. After he stopped loving me, I gave up on him sooner than my mother, who refused to accept the truth. I made countless wishes in my heart to stop loving Dad, yet I still cried when I saw him accompanying another child in the supermarket. It seems he's forgotten how much he loved me when he used to hold me in his arms and shower me with endless praise. It seems he's forgotten how he never missed a single important stage of my life before. Even as a young child, without many grand moments worth celebrating, he would always create various surprises. Those surprises contained all his love, silencing all those who urged him to have a second child and leaving them envious. Later, he stopped loving Mom, and he stopped loving me. The back he left me and the indifference grew gradually more than the love, so much so that looking at photos, I can no longer remember how he loved me. It's not that he didn't know how to be a father. He knew how to love. He loved the Mom of the past and the me of the past, then turned around to become a good father and husband to someone else. Even if I say 1,000 times in my heart that I don't love him, I still feel sad. They used to love me so much. Kelvin still refuses to give up and continues to pester, privately seeking every opportunity to meet Lucy. Then he asks why, just as he said, he wants to die knowing the truth, not wanting a relationship that began with genuine feelings to end without a clear reason. He was well aware that Lucy still liked him, and she wasn't the type to casually start a relationship or end things carelessly. There must have been something that crossed her bottom line, but he truly couldn't figure out what he had done. He had practically dug up every memory from his diaper-wearing days. Meanwhile, Lucy wasn't doing well either. I could tell she was softening and struggling. Perhaps over time, she might still get back together with Kelvin and repeat the same mistakes. After all, my vague words carry too little weight. Without truly experiencing it herself, she can't genuinely empathize or learn the lesson, even if it's her future self who suffers. Lying together on a small bed, she whispered, "Can you tell me more about the future in detail?" She probably wanted concrete details to serve as a wake-up call for her softening heart in this moment. There are too many things. I don't know where to begin. After a long silence, she spoke. "You got into college." Lucy's eyes lit up. "Which one? Is it the one I wanted to go to?" "Actually, I don't know. All I know is that after I was born, she quit her job and became a housewife." When talking about her past, she would simply say she married your father right after graduating from college, which university she attended, what major she studied, or what job she found after graduation. She never mentioned any of these to her daughter, as if she had personally buried her own past. I nodded. Lucy let out a cheer, as the slight gloom brought by Kelvin instantly dissipated. "And then, what major did I choose? What job did I find after graduation?" "Your favorite major, the job you dream of the most." I couldn't answer. Lucy was so excited she could hardly resist going out for a run in the middle of the night. Then I must have become a designer, designing my own house and my own room with my own hands. Did Mom actually want to be a designer? I never knew, Lucy said happily. I don't have my own room. Even after living at my grandparents' house for over a decade, I never felt a sense of belonging. I've drawn many room designs, but right now, I don't have the means or the authority to create my own space. I never thought I'd actually make it happen in the future. Compared to her own dreams, Kelvin seemed to have become an insignificant supporting character. Lucy kept talking to me about her future, her hobbies, her studies and career. It wasn't until there was nothing left to talk about that she finally remembered Kelvin. "So, how exactly did Kelvin cheat?" I remained silent for a moment, gathering my thoughts. "You got together at 17, dated for 5 years. You were in school while he was starting his business. You had just graduated from university when his business took off, and he proposed. You smoothly entered the halls of matrimony. Not long after the wedding, you got pregnant." "Wait," Lucy interrupted. "I got pregnant not long after the wedding. What about my career?" should have just started working after graduating from university. I remained silent. Lucy widened her eyes, sat up, and exclaimed excitedly, "Does that mean I have to quit my job just to go home and have a baby?" "No, you'll be on maternity leave." I told a harmless lie to ease Lucy's worries. I gazed at her profile, wondering why she was so concerned about her career now, yet could abandon it without hesitation in the future. People really do change. What you think at 17 is different from what you think in your 20s, Lucy asked curiously. "So, is it a boy or a girl I had?" I countered. "Do you hope for a boy or a girl?" "Lucy, of course, both boys and girls are wonderful," I said. "It's a girl." After the child was born, both you and Kelvin adored her, spoiling her like a little princess. Back then, many people urged you to have a second child, so she could have a companion and so Kelvin could have a successor, especially since his career was thriving. After all, he needed a son to carry on the family legacy. Lucy frowned, her eyes filled with disapproval. She herself had been abandoned by her father because she was a girl, so hearing such remarks naturally upset her, especially when they were directed at her future daughter. Her anger flared up almost instantly. She said, "Why can't a daughter inherit? We'll only have one child, and my daughter will enjoy all the love and money. Let them be jealous." Though I never witnessed how my parents responded to such comments when I was born, I always imagined it must have been exactly like Lucy's reaction just now. In another way, it unfolded before her daughter. My eyes grew slightly moist as I lay flat staring at the ceiling, tears disappearing into my hair and dripping onto the pillow. Perhaps people really do change. After steadying my emotions, I spoke again. "You and Kelvin thought the same way back then. You insisted on not having a second child, until he cheated." It's perfectly normal for couples to have arguments in daily life. When all sorts of big and small matters accumulate, it's hard to avoid occasional outbursts. If they can work through these conflicts, life can still go on. But the problem was that Kelvin made a mistake during this adjustment period. Then he kept making mistakes, until things reached an irreparable point, and the nature of their relationship fundamentally changed. Lucy wanted to reconcile, but Kelvin had tasted sweetness beyond love and was unwilling to turn back. The two of them pulled and entangled, resenting each other for 18 years, grinding what was once a loving couple into bitter adversaries, into two separate families, before finally reaching divorce. And it was on the way to the divorce that Lucy was involved in a car accident, the vehicle destroyed and her life lost. At that time, I was in the car, accompanying my mother to the divorce. She was persuading me, comforting me, even calling Kelvin, and then an argument broke out. When the car accident struck, she immediately threw herself over to shield me. After realizing she couldn't move, she desperately pushed me out of the car, calming me down and telling me to call for help to save her. My whole body ached, but I didn't dare stop running as I begged passers-by for assistance. But before the ambulance could arrive, Mom passed away first. She died on the eve of starting a new life. Lucy fell silent for a long time after hearing this, perhaps even more heartbroken than when she learned about Kelvin's future infidelity. This time, I laid bare the ugly side of marriage before her in great detail. Using a child's experiences, I tried my best to describe marriage as she saw it. For a young person who still held beautiful illusions about love, this was hard to accept. Lucy turned away, perhaps not wanting me to see her tears. "You're too good at telling stories. You made me cry." Maybe because it's not a story, but the truth, it's the 18 years I truly lived through, so the happiness was real, and so was the pain. Lucy's voice was hoarse, choked with tears, as she said, "Actually, saving him that time wasn't our first meeting, when she was thrown into this town. She knew no one, she only went out to meet people when her grandparents took her along. Some would smile and praise her to her face, but the moment she turned around, they'd look at her through tinted lenses, gossiping about her parents. When her father married his mistress, he invited her grandparents to the wedding. They left her alone at home, asking a neighbor to bring her meals, but the neighbor forgot. She stayed hungry at home all day, dizzy from starvation, with no other choice. She had to go out to find food herself, but she had no money, didn't know the way, and didn't know anyone. She set her sights on the fruit in the trees, trying to climb up to pick them, but her hands and feet were too weak, causing her to fall to the ground many times. As a child, she would always obsess over trivial matters, like when a neighbor simply forgot about her. She would stubbornly refuse to eat at their house, even though all she needed to do was knock on their door and explain the situation. Even if the other person wasn't happy about it, it was still better than going hungry, or like the time she couldn't climb a tree but insisted on doing so, determined to eat the fruit at the top. Her grandparents used to say that with a temper like hers, she was bound to suffer sooner or later. Kelvin was crouching in the tree at that time. He loved climbing trees. Having scaled every one near his home, he would often stay up there for no particular reason, like a wild man. He watched her from above for as long as she struggled below. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he asked what she wanted by climbing up. Lucy said she was hungry. She was almost starving to the point of fainting. Kelvin picked a few fruits from the branch and tossed them to her. She gave up her meaningless persistence, hugged the fruits, and started munching on them. Not caring whether they were washed or dirty, Kelvin asked her why she was climbing the tree, and Lucy, refusing to be outdone, asked him why he was staying in the tree. His small body clung to the tree trunk as he said staying in the tree kept him from being beaten by his father. After that, they would occasionally meet and exchange a few words, sometimes even tacitly agreeing to meet under the same tree. He was afraid of his drunken father, and Lucy was afraid of her father returning home. Two children from broken families made a tree their temporary home and each other their temporary family, but as they grew older, Kelvin's bad reputation spread, and he stopped paying attention to her, and Lucy wasn't the type to easily back down either. The two tacitly became strangers until the day the ice between them finally broke. Lucy cried for a long time, her sobs echoing in my ears for what felt like ages. Lying on my side, I suddenly felt as if I'd returned to the past. My mother used to be like this too, sharing the same bed with me. When I woke up startled at midnight, her suppressed weeping would drift from the other side of the bed. At some point, Lucy's emotions seemed to ease. She spoke up, "Can I talk it out with Kelvin?" Lucy took me to see Kelvin. He was overjoyed when he saw Lucy, greeted his boss, and rushed out of the store to meet her. Kelvin had been working part-time while attending school since middle school, even skipping classes to dedicate more time to work. He knew he wasn't particularly talented academically, so he had long prepared himself to drop out and enter society early. As it turned out, he had made the right choice. Lucy initially found it hard to speak, as the matter was indeed unbelievable, but she still managed to stammer out the entire story. The change in Kelvin's expression was almost identical to Lucy's initial reaction. He said in disbelief, "You're saying I would cheat? That's impossible." He genuinely believed from the bottom of his heart that he could never cheat. From a very early age, he had regarded Lucy as the most important person in the world. He could never hurt her, let alone knowingly cross her boundaries. He even felt it was impossible for him to stop loving her. Kelvin simply couldn't accept the future Lucy described. Nor could he accept that such a disgusting version of himself would be his future self. What's the difference between him and his father? What is he doing? Is he making his wife relive his mother's path, forcing his child to repeat the inescapable childhood he endured? How could he possibly do that? Kelvin's eyes were bloodshot as he suddenly turned to me and said, "Then who are you? You look so much like Lucy, are you?" He stared into my eyes, those eyes so similar to his own, as if the words he wanted to say were stuck in his throat. Overwhelmed by a tidal wave of guilt, it left him speechless. He couldn't bring himself to voice the possibility in his heart, but Lucy glanced at me and said I was her from the future. Kelvin said it was impossible again. He thought that even if the possibility he had in mind didn't exist, I couldn't possibly be the future Lucy. But when I look at you, I don't feel any love at all. I have no feelings for you. He paused mid-sentence. As if realizing this wasn't quite right, he did have some feelings for the person before him. He could clearly tell that it wasn't love. If I were Lucy, how could he not love me at all? My heart ached sharply, and my breathing grew rapid. Only when the wind blew past did I realize tears had fallen. Even though I knew full well he no longer loved me, neither in the past nor the future, with hatred in my eyes, I declared firmly, "Because you cheated." It was as if these words had pressed some kind of switch. All three of us shed tears, seeing the pain reflected in each other's eyes, for the messy future ahead, for the unchangeable future. For many days afterward, I didn't see Kelvin again, and Lucy became much quieter. I'd pick her up and drop her off at school every day, just like my mom used to do for me in the past. Many neighbors in the area have come to know me. They think I'm Mom's twin sister, who was previously living with her father or mother and only recently returned. Great-grandma and great-grandpa didn't drive me away, probably because I look so much like Mom. They also love me by extension, sharing some of their affection with me. Lucy and I lie in bed, occasionally chatting, doing our best to avoid any topics related to Kelvin. Lucy said, "Seems like we've talked about many people around me. But what about my daughter? You haven't mentioned her." I froze. I thought if we talked enough, she would eventually forget about the person I intentionally left out. I didn't know how to talk about myself. I don't know how to talk about myself from my mother's perspective. I can only try my best to describe the image of a little girl protected by her mother. Lucy didn't raise any questions, murmuring, "I must have loved her very much." I lowered my eyelashes and said nothing. Mom's birthday came soon, and she invited some close classmates from her class. It was the first time I realized she had so many friends, but throughout my childhood, I'd only ever seen a few, so few I could count them on one hand. It wasn't until the crowd dispersed that someone lingered at our doorstep for a long time. When they saw me come out, they shoved something into my arms and ran off. I guess it was Kelvin who had them delivered, but there are two gifts. My expression must have looked odd. He probably accepted me as the future Lucy, so he prepared two gifts. One has a name, the other doesn't. I handed both items to Lucy and said, "These were probably sent by Kelvin." Lucy took the two exquisitely wrapped gifts and examined them, then handed the unnamed one to me. "This one is definitely for you. If it's given to you, just accept it. This is what he owes you." Lucy unwrapped her gift. It turned out to be a set of workbooks and exam papers. Even though she doesn't dislike studying, her face darkened when she saw them. But tucked between the exam papers was a box containing a fountain pen that looked quite expensive and a beautiful diary. On top of the notebook was a sticky note with a drawing of a grinning boy, along with the words, "Did you curse me when you saw the test?" I sneezed. Even though Lucy and he were in some undefined relationship now, she would still open the gifts he sent and be amused by them. If not for marriage, they might have remained as close as family even after breaking up. I silently lowered my head to look at the gift in my hand. What kind of gift carries guilt? Lucy finished looking at her own gift, crawled over to see mine, and urged me to open it quickly. I carefully unwrapped the exquisitely packaged gift. It was a silver bracelet, just like the one they put on my wrist when I was little, only it somehow disappeared later, just like their love for each other, their love for me. My tears instantly fell onto the bracelet, splashing tiny droplets of water. I seemed to taste the bitterness and pain in my own tears. If they loved me so much before, why did they suddenly stop? Why can love be transferred to other children? Mom didn't speak. She silently wiped away my tears, then whispered softly, "You're not the future me, are you? I am her future daughter. You are my child." She leaned gently against me, yet I felt as if crushed by 1,000 mountains, only able to weep, unable to speak. I am her child, the one who couldn't voice my sorrow. The one who was loved and then abandoned, the one she desperately protected at the end of her life, the one trapped in time. I am the child born when Lucy and Kelvin were most in love. Yang Jiayuan, Lucy cried too. She said, "I will definitely treat you poorly in the future." If she were to treat her daughter well in the future, she wouldn't be standing here before her now. She wouldn't be meeting her with eyes full of sorrow and numbness, as if, despite not being very old, she carried wounds all over her body. She listened to her tell many stories about other people, some fabricated to amuse her, others true, but when it came to mentioning herself, her words were very few, so few it seemed as if she wished to disappear. A child raised in love would not grow up like this. Lucy knew very well that her future daughter had become the present version of herself. Just like how she could only see the big tree as her home, two already broken individuals formed a new family, only to create another broken home in a replica of their own childhood selves. At 17, Lucy didn't know how to be a mother. She simply treated me the way her own mother had once treated her, but those memories were distant and hazy, making her imitation awkward and unnatural, as if she were playing house with me. I told her to just treat me normally like before, and she breathed a sigh of relief. After all, forcing a young girl in the prime of her youth to suddenly take on a motherly role was a bit too much to adapt to. Then she said, "Shall we go to the amusement park in the city this weekend?" I nodded. She added somewhat cautiously, "Kelvin wants to come too." I paused for a moment. Even after sending gifts, Kelvin hadn't met with us, only occasionally sending things over through others. Most of the time, they were novel gifts. Once, he gave me a stack of cash tucked inside a red envelope. Kelvin didn't know how adults treated their own children. His childhood was filled with arguments and fists, but occasionally, he would see some families buy silver bracelets for their kids, stuff red envelopes, or bring back toy gifts after a long trip. He mimicked others by giving me presents, just as Lucy imitated the mother in her memories to be my mom. Looking at the pile of gifts in the corner and the silver bracelets that never made it onto my wrists, I remembered how they treated me the same way when I was very young. Mom would wear an apron to cook my favorite meals, praise me for every trivial thing I did, and love me unconditionally. Occasionally, she would be at her wit's end with me, breaking down in tears without a care for her image. At those moments, it was as if the mask of the perfect mom had fallen from her face, revealing that she was still just a child who hadn't grown up, clumsily trying to love me by imitating others. Dad would bring me gifts from every business trip, stuff red envelopes into my pockets during holidays, and deck me out in gold and silver jewelry like a New Year's painting doll, then hold me up to the camera with a big laugh. Those happy, perfect photos now feel like memorial portraits of the past. The person is still here, but the love is gone. On the way to the amusement park, I wore a silver bracelet, pocketed the allowance Kelvin gave me, and held Lucy's hand as we went to catch the ride. The car was arranged by Kelvin, and the driver was someone he knew. When Lucy and I got in the car, the driver remarked curiously, "I thought you'd be going out with your girlfriend. How come there's an extra little girl?" Kelvin sat in the passenger seat, pretending to joke. "That's my daughter. We're a family of 3. The driver laughed and said, "Cut the crap. Where'd you get such a big daughter?" Kelvin replied, "Then take a look for yourself. Does she look like she's ours?" Hearing this, the driver actually glanced in the rearview mirror and said, "She does kind of resemble you. The eyes are like yours, and the rest looks like your girlfriend." Only Kelvin and the driver were chatting along the way, while Lucy and I were dozing off in the back seat. An hour and a half later, we arrived at the amusement park. The facilities at this time weren't as advanced as they would be in the future, and the crowd wasn't large enough to be packed like sardines. Staring at the entrance of the amusement park, I felt a momentary daze, unable to remember how long it had been since I last visited. It must have been a long time ago when we came here, just like now, a family of 3, but that memory has become so hazy that I can hardly recall much even when I try hard to remember, although it was said that Kelvin led the trip. In fact, apart from me, both Lucy and Kelvin were here for the first time. They looked around with even more curiosity than I did. Lucy held my arm and asked, "Have we ever brought you here to play before?" I nodded. Lucy said, "That's great. You can take Mom and Dad to play then." Perhaps out of habit, Lucy was becoming increasingly adept at putting on her mom act in front of me, though it looked somewhat awkward, like a child playing at being an adult. After trying a few rides, both Lucy and I felt a bit tired, so we found a bench to sit and rest. Leaning against each other, Kelvin spotted something with his sharp eyes, got up to check it out, and returned with 2 enormous cotton candies and 3 small pudding popsicles. He handed me the cotton candy and popsicles, his lips trembling as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he remained silent, lowering his head slightly in defeat before sitting back down beside Lucy. My gaze drifted to another bench not far away, where another family of 3 sat. The father held an armful of treats while the child clutched both cotton candy and a popsicle in each hand. The mother had a popsicle stick between her teeth, scolding the child with a laugh for getting sticky hands from the melting popsicle, all the while carefully wiping them clean with a wet wipe. After eating the ice cream, my hands inevitably got a little sticky. Lucy took my hand and carefully wiped it clean for me. I looked down at her youthful face. The hazy images buried deep in my memory seemed to grow slightly clearer. I couldn't tell whether I had truly remembered or simply replaced those old memories with the moments we shared now. Playing all day long, they acted like children while pretending to be my parents. I carefully recorded every moment, using these to replace the faded fragments in my memory, stretching out the time they loved me. Perhaps this way, when revealing the truth, I could gather more evidence that they once loved me. "I'm not your favorite child." Sitting in the shade to cool off, I told them the hidden second half of the story. The truth, told in a gentle and unhurried manner, slowly faded the lingering joy. I am not my father's favorite child. He only loved me for 5 years. The rest of the time, he was being someone else's father. I am not my mother's favorite child. She only loved me for 10 years. The rest of the time, she was being my younger brother's mother. I watched as Lucy and Kelvin's faces gradually turned pale, disbelief written all over them. In the future, one would betray their own love, while the other would go against the wishes of their youth. Kelvin once vowed he would never become like his father, and Lucy once said she wouldn't let her daughter relive her own path. We used to have many family portraits, And behind each photo was their love poured out for me. They recorded the time of my birth, celebrated every occasion big and small for me, and they wished for me to be the happiest person in the world. When I was just born, Dad said he hoped to be the one who could hold up the sky for me, but later his vast home couldn't even make room for me. Mom said she only wanted me as her child and would give me all her love. Later, she said even with a younger brother, her love for me wouldn't change. In the end, she wanted me to stay with Dad because my brother couldn't be without a mother. Does Mom love me? Yes, she does. She would do everything in her power to protect me in a car accident, exhaust all her strength to save me, and then give up on herself. But I also have to accept it through the long years and cycles of reincarnation. Her favorite isn't me, it's my younger brother. Before the age of 5, I was the apple of the whole family's eye. Before 10, I was my mother's darling. After 10, I became everyone's second choice, at the beginning of their marriage's collapse. My father didn't want a divorce, and my mother also wanted to salvage it. Her thoughts gradually became imprisoned and altered by the marriage. In the year I turned 10, she became pregnant as everyone around her had hoped. I was no longer the enviable only child. I became the older sister who had to yield to the younger one. After my father stopped loving me, my mother also let go of my tightly held hand to embrace another child. I was abandoned at the age of 5. Watching my father walk toward another family, taking another child's hand, responding to another child calling him Dad, I was abandoned at the age of 10, watching my mother approach my newborn brother, holding his tiny hand, responding to his unintelligible babble. I was abandoned at the age of 18, when my parents ended their 18-year marriage. My father rushed to another family, while my mother, on the way to divorce, tried to persuade me to stay with my father. She wanted to take my brother with her. The reason was that I had grown up and could take care of myself, while my younger brother was still small and couldn't be without a mother. But Mom, I lost you when I was just 10, I was trapped at 18. Everyone at the funeral was crying, except me. They forced me to cry, saying Mom had given me a second life. My brother demanded I give Mom back to him, and Dad was drowning in grief. They won't let me step out of time, nor do I allow myself to step out of time, so I began the journey of time reversal. The first reversal took me back to when I was 6 years old. That year, my mother asked me for the first time, "Can I divorce your dad? If I do, who would you choose to live with, in a life that cannot be relived?" I was just a normal 6-year-old child. I didn't understand the complexities between adults. All I knew was that Mom was going to take me away from Dad, the second most important person in my life. I cried and said I didn't want her to divorce Dad, that I wanted our family to stay together forever. With tears in her eyes, Mom agreed. She swallowed this bitter pill and stayed in the prison of marriage for my sake. Years later, I was struck by the words I had spoken long ago, as if everything that followed was retribution for what I had said back then. I was the one who gave Dad the unchecked power, the power to enter another family, the power for Mom to stop loving me. Every year since then, I've regretted why I ever said those words. I kept condemning myself, those self-reproaching words like snowflakes piling upon me year after year, until the day of the funeral. When the avalanche came, every sentence became a sharp blade turned against myself. So during the first regression, I went back to when I was 6 years old. I made my mom get a divorce. And they actually succeeded in divorcing, but my father, who had made his first mistake, regretted it. They went back and forth like characters in a novel, and in the end, they remarried. Everything seemed to return to its original course. They had a second child, a product of their love, but he cheated again. I was forgotten once more, and once again, I died in a car accident. The second time, I checked every possible issue with the car. I didn't even allow my mom to drive or ride in a car. But in the end, she still pushed me away and died. For the third, fourth, and fifth times, I searched among countless people for a way for Mom to survive, even willing to give up myself. Yet everything seemed to have a self-repairing function, pulling everyone back onto their original paths. Later, I desperately wanted to stop the regression, but everything was no longer under my control. I was trapped in time, following the watch's hands through cycle after cycle. Witnessing over and over the collapse of my parents' marriage and Mom's death. After many times, I sometimes wonder if I don't need a mother, if I don't need a home, but every time I look back, I'm terrified to realize that I do. If only I didn't know what love is. If only they had never loved me from the beginning, then I could have learned earlier how to protect myself, had more time to accept the fact that they don't love me. and more experiences to support the conclusion that I don't need love, but I did receive it. I once fully received love from my parents, so when it was lost, I couldn't accept it, no matter how many times I told myself they didn't love me and that I didn't have to love them either. I just couldn't do it. No parents don't love their own child. I was born into this world with their love and anticipation, only to be forgotten as their affection faded. I seem to love my parents more than they love me. I hate them, but only because they didn't love me enough, because they abandoned me after loving me, because they forgot me after forgetting their own love. They've both found their place in life. But what about me? Yet all that love and hate vanished the moment I saw my mother's life coming to an end. In the car, she tried to persuade me to go with my father. I clenched my teeth and refused, as if by not giving in, I could hold on to my mother's love forever. She then called my father, hoping he could convince me, but an argument broke out. As I cried over the wrecked car and my blood-covered mother, I said I agreed. I agree to you giving up on me, not loving me, abandoning me. As long as you can come back to life, I accept Dad giving up on me, not loving me, abandoning me. As long as you're safe. If only I were born unloved. If only I were a little older. If only you had abandoned me a little slower. If you had given me a little more time, perhaps by the time I'm 20 or 30, I wouldn't need a mother anymore. Maybe I could maturely accept the absence of a mother's love, perhaps come to terms with being everyone's second choice, and accept that no one in this world loves me except myself. But I'm only 18, I can't live without my mother. I really shouldn't have told them any of this. They are not their future selves. They haven't made mistakes, haven't stopped loving me, haven't abandoned me. They are still carefree youths themselves. They cannot bear the responsibilities of parents, only imitating and learning from others. They shouldn't have to endure that heavy, sorrowful future either. I don't want to admit it, but I have to. I hate them. The more I learn about their past, the more I hate them. Why is it that some things you've clearly experienced, clearly empathized with, and even swore in your heart never to become, yet you still end up repeating the same mistakes in the future? I thought I was their failed experiment, their trial run at parenting, that I didn't meet their expectations, so they learned from me and turned to raise a child who better fit their ideals. I was simply born at the wrong time, before they were ready to be the best parents they could be. I've used these very reasons to convince myself, to tell myself that those cherished memories don't really matter. But the past versions of them told me they understood all the reasons, with no other excuses. It's just that their heart has tilted. It's just that they don't love me as much anymore. How am I supposed to accept this? They actually don't love me anymore. Lucy stared blankly into my eyes, unsure how to process the overwhelming amount of hidden information. Yet after hearing the whole story, she didn't want to think about the second-born child. She wanted to ask, then what about you? What about you? Who lost a father first and then was abandoned by your mother? What do you do when you lose the love you once had? What do you do when you can't compare to your younger brother? Each question is a sharp sword piercing her own heart. Who is she asking, after all? Is she questioning herself, or her own daughter? She doesn't understand. She can't comprehend. Yet she's destined to never grasp the events of a future that hasn't happened, nor fathom her future self. Perhaps they can only know this one thing, adding to their pain without being able to change it. It seems like an unsolvable riddle. It seems that with every piece of this future story unraveled, the three of them are left in tears. Kelvin cried and said sorry. He carries the sins of crimes yet to be committed, unable to atone or forgive himself. At night, I got into bed before Lucy. She disappeared after dinner, and no one knew where she went. It took a long time before she finally lay down in bed, her body exhausted. She suddenly said, "Can you tell me more about the rest of it?" The part that wasn't fully revealed was Mom's death. Lucy knew very well that everything in this world follows its own rules, and time is especially sacred and inviolable, just like in movies and TV shows. If someone reverses time, there must be something they absolutely have to do. So she was certain that I was still hiding an untold story. I could hear the lingering tremble of tears in her voice. In this small town where nothing stays secret, perhaps by tomorrow I'd hear the tragic love story of her and Kelvin crying in each other's arms. After a moment of silence, I slowly began to speak. When the whole story was told, no one in the room uttered a word, until I fell into a deep sleep. Lucy never spoke again, but on the not-so-large bed, I could clearly feel her body trembling from crying. She desperately tried to muffle her sobs, suppressing her weeping, letting the tears soak the pillow. Lucy couldn't picture the scene I described, but she had experienced it herself, suffering years of nightmares where she was constantly abandoned, forever unwanted, kicked around like a ball. After waking from these dreams, she would always lie in bed thinking that perhaps she would never escape the curse of being abandoned in this lifetime. But she never imagined that she would become the one to abandon her own daughter. On the day she learned she would have a daughter in the future, she wrote in her diary that she would love her forever. Now those words seem like a cruel joke. How could anyone not love their own child? She had thought this countless times while recalling her own abandonment. At this moment, she was also questioning herself. I slept so deeply that I didn't wake up until noon the next day, and my head ached when I did. I thought Lucy had already gone to school, but unexpectedly, I ran into her as she was returning to her room right after I finished washing up. She said with a smile, "Lunch is ready, you can go downstairs to eat." She had dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept all night, and explained, "I took the day off today." Downstairs, I saw several dishes laid out on the dining table, all of which were my favorites, but they were unevenly cooked, clearly showing the cook's lack of skill. There was even an attempt to cover up the burnt dishes with the better-looking ones to make the plates appear more presentable. My gaze fell on Lucy's hands, where traces of unwashed brown grease still lingered. During the meal, she kept observing my expression while eating, probably trying to figure out which dishes suited my taste. I deliberately didn't let her notice, eating with a straight face. By the end of the meal, Lucy still had no idea what I thought of her cooking. All she could say was, "Let's go out and have some fun, just us," she emphasized. Lucy didn't know what unknown force had brought me to the past, nor did she know when I would leave. She simply wanted to spend as much time with me as possible. Perhaps it carried a hint of compensation, or perhaps it came from the heart without reason. Lucy took out the pocket money she had saved for a long time, every New Year's red envelope. The living expenses her grandparents gave her regularly, she would always set aside half. Because she feared a future without support, she was deeply worried that despite her immense effort to get into university, no one would be able to provide the necessary funds. So from a very young age, she started saving money and asking Kelvin about work-related matters. She hoped not to place all her future hopes on the goodwill of certain people. If only she could hold on to her original intentions in the future. Perhaps if she had recognized the ugly side of marriage in time, cut her losses early, and left promptly, all the suffering that followed could have been avoided. In the end, it was all her own doing. Lucy closed her wallet and counted the money, including Kelvin's share. She invested generously in me, as if making up for what her future self would owe, or nurturing her past self. Lucy took my hand and asked, "Bella, do you know the way home? Not this current home, but the one in the future. Time cannot be changed. A time traveler from the future cannot remain in the past forever." I shook my head. Lucy's eyes were filled with worry, but she still smiled and comforted me. "Maybe if I never marry Kelvin, never be with him, you'll never disappear." I asked, "What if I disappear?" Lucy froze. There was actually another possibility hidden in these words. If she never married Kelvin, then I could never be born, and over time, my existence might be erased. But if Lucy married Kelvin to give birth to me, she would unknowingly fall back into the original path, aligning with the fate of the past. Lucy hesitated. I actually laughed. This was the first time in countless cycles that she made a choice different from the past. She was weighing the pros and cons for herself, rather than me clearing obstacles for her and paving a smooth path. What needed to change was never the predetermined future, but herself, more than loving me. At this moment, she loved herself more. She didn't know if it was right to give birth to me and step into the future I described, but she knew she didn't want that future. Even though she had deep feelings for the present Kelvin and deep affection for the future me, she still hesitated whether to sacrifice herself and take on that future for our sake. Her hesitation was already the best answer. She didn't want it. 17-year-old Lucy didn't want to accept such a future, even though the person she loved hadn't made any mistakes yet. Even though her daughter had crossed time and space to love her, Lucy locked eyes with me, and in that instant, she understood that even without saying a word, I knew what she wanted to say. She said, "Choosing myself doesn't mean I don't love you." It was precisely my love that made her realize what truly mattered. Giving up on oneself is not only harmful to oneself but also to those who love you. It weakens the rationality that could help her cut her losses in time. Constantly leading her in the wrong direction, Lucy said, "No matter what the future holds, you will always be my beloved child. There is no marriage that must be saved, no man that must be tied down, and no second child, in this timeline, in the altered present and future, I will always be Lucy's most beloved child, without hesitation. I threw myself into her embrace. We held each other tightly, in the wrong time, yet with the most perfect love. With tears in her eyes, Lucy said, "I'm sorry for how I treated you in the future, for all the pain I caused you. Stop trying to change the past for Mom's sake. What you need is to accept reality and stride boldly toward your own future. I will love you in different times. I will always love you. Will you live on with my love?" "Bella," I cried until I was nearly suffocating. Feeling time begin to flow for me again. All I ever wanted was an apology and unwavering love. I stepped out of her embrace and walked forward with my back to Lucy. This time, she didn't follow to take my hand. I kept moving forward until I walked out of her time. All around was desolation. Time stood still. In the end, the ceaseless cycle of trying to save someone leads to accepting their departure. Opening my eyes again, I heard the beeping of machines and saw the haggard figure sitting by the bed. Before I could clearly see the face, I heard urgent calls, and soon doctors and nurses arrived by my bedside. I saw my father's face full of worry as he turned away to wipe his tears. It seemed like a long time since I had seen such an expression on his face. After he started a second family outside, he rarely came home, and sometimes I would forget what he looked like, deliberately trying to recall. I realized he had aged much more than in my memory, with wrinkles added at the corners of his eyes. I still can't accept living under the same roof with him. Even though he doesn't come home often, he has the right to return to that house. I want to go to a home where he can't enter or leave as he pleases without my permission. Dad angrily scolded me for overthinking. His face twisted into a ferocious expression for a moment, probably remembering I had just woken up, then softened his tone slightly. "I won't marry anyone else. Everything at home belongs to you and your brother. I know you hate me because of your mother." His voice choked up. When news of Lucy's death in a car accident spread, he stood frozen, at a loss. They had loved each other for so many years, resented each other for so many years, only to end up separated by death in the end. The moment he heard the news, he felt nothing, calmly hanging up the phone. In the solitude of his own space, endless thoughts began to spread, and memories flooded in like a tide. The older one grows, the more one tends to reminisce about the past. While alive, he only remembered the other's detestable appearance, and the time spent resenting each other gradually surpassed the time spent in love. He always wanted to break free from her, but when he truly lost her completely, he began to feel the pain instead. During the days his daughter was in a coma, scenes from the past kept flashing through his mind. The dreams he had at night were all those haunting memories, as if mocking him, scolding him, blaming him, resenting him. He even dreamed of his younger self shedding tears of blood, staring at him with eyes like those of a demon. It was as if he wanted to kill him in the dream, to personally bury his own detestable and hateful future. Only by constantly watching his daughter on the hospital bed did Kelvin suddenly realize how long it had been since he had truly looked at her properly. Back when she was born, he had sworn to shield her from all harm, ensuring she could live this life carefree, safe, and healthy. Kelvin took a deep breath and reiterated, "Dad won't marry anyone else. Everything in this family will belong to you and your brother." It seemed like an apology, yet also as if he hadn't apologized to anyone in so long that even the simplest words, "I'm sorry," felt painfully difficult to utter. I accepted his promise but still chose to leave, carrying the suitcase. I glanced back as I left home. This home witnessed the love between Kelvin and Lucy, as well as the shattering of that love and the trivial miseries of marriage. It bore the weight of sobs and tears. In the past, I was abandoned here, confined within self-drawn boundaries. Now, I've walked out on my own. Leaving wasn't actually that hard, neither was moving forward. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.